I'm worth $2.3 billion, but I couldn't save my 16-year-old daughter's life. 5 of the world's best cardiac surgeons told me there was nothing more they could do. That's when a homeless man sitting outside my Seattle office building looked me dead in the eye and said 3 words that changed everything. I can fix it. Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. My name is Vivian Hartwell, and I built my tech empire from nothing. I've closed deals worth hundreds of millions, revolutionized software development, and made Forbes' most powerful women list 3 years running. But none of that mattered when my daughter Brielle was lying in a hospital bed, her heart failing because of a rare condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. The doctors had tried everything. The experimental artificial heart valve we'd spent $2 million developing kept failing at the crucial moment during surgery. The micro-welding that was supposed to attach it to her heart tissue wouldn't hold. Every attempt ended the same way. Another failed operation. Another night watching my brilliant, artistic daughter grow weaker while I threw money at a problem that seemed unsolvable. Chester didn't look like someone who could help. He was probably in his 60s, wearing a torn winter coat that had seen better decades. His weathered hands were busy fixing a broken wheelchair he'd found in the alley, using tools that looked like they came from a dollar store. Most people walked past him without a second glance. I almost did too. But when I stopped that rainy Seattle night, emotionally destroyed after the 5th failed surgery, something about the way Chester worked caught my attention. His movements were precise, methodical. There was an intelligence in his eyes that didn't match the stereotype of homelessness that society had programmed me to expect. What I didn't know was that Chester used to be one of Boeing's top mechanical engineers. He'd spent 30 years designing precision aircraft components before the 2008 financial crisis destroyed his life. His wife died of cancer, the medical bills consumed their savings, and he lost everything. For 8 years, he'd been living on the streets, but his brilliant engineering mind never left him. That night, as rain soaked through my $1,000 suit, I was about to discover that sometimes the most valuable solutions come from the most unexpected places. Chester wasn't just going to save my daughter's life. He was going to teach me that the most important things in this world can't be bought, sold, or traded on any market. Let me take you back to where this all started, because you need to understand who I was before that night changed everything. 5 years ago, I lost my husband David in a car accident. He was coming home from Brielle's school play when a drunk driver ran a red light. The grief nearly destroyed me, but I had an 11-year-old daughter to raise and a struggling software company that employed 43 people. So I did what I thought I had to do. I buried myself in work. I turned my pain into profit. 18-hour days became my normal. I missed parent-teacher conferences, soccer games, and birthday parties. When Brielle would ask me to help with homework, I'd hire tutors instead. When she wanted to talk about her day, I'd schedule dinner meetings. I convinced myself I was building something important for our future, but the truth was simpler and more devastating. Work was where I felt in control, and grief was where I felt helpless. The company exploded. We went from 43 employees to over 8,000. Our software revolutionized how hospitals manage patient data, and suddenly everyone wanted to partner with us. The money poured in faster than I could count it. Forbes called me a visionary. Harvard Business School wanted to study my leadership methods. I had everything society told me should make me happy. But my daughter was slipping away from me, one missed conversation at a time. Brielle had always been artistic, just like her father. She'd spend hours sketching buildings and dreaming about becoming an architect. She'd show me her drawings, eyes bright with excitement, describing the hospitals and schools she wanted to design. I'd glance at them while checking emails and say something like, "That's nice, honey," before rushing off to another meeting. I thought we had time. I thought I could make it up to her later, once the company was more established, once the next deal was closed, once the next crisis was handled. But time doesn't wait for billionaires to get their priorities straight. When Brielle was 15, she collapsed during a track meet. At first, the doctors thought it was exhaustion or dehydration. But the tests revealed something far worse, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a genetic condition that makes the heart muscle abnormally thick. It's rare, unpredictable, and in her case, rapidly progressing. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd built my fortune helping hospitals manage data more efficiently, but all that technology couldn't save my own daughter. The condition was too advanced for traditional treatments. She needed surgery to replace part of her heart with an artificial valve, but the procedure was so complex that only a handful of surgeons worldwide were qualified to attempt it. Money wasn't the problem. I could afford any doctor, any hospital, any experimental treatment. What I couldn't buy was a guarantee that any of it would work. The artificial valve required precision manufacturing that pushed the limits of current medical technology. The attachment process involved micro-welding at a level so exact that the smallest imperfection would cause catastrophic failure. We'd already had 3 attempts, and each time, the valve failed to properly integrate with her heart tissue. Brielle handled it all with a grace that humbled me. Even as her condition worsened, she kept sketching. Her hospital room was filled with architectural drawings of community centers and libraries, buildings designed to bring people together. She'd look at me with David's eyes and say things like, "Mom, you don't have to fix everything yourself, you know." But fixing things was what I did. It was who I'd become after David died. And now, faced with the one problem that mattered most, all my money and influence felt worthless. I was watching my daughter fade away, and for the first time in 5 years, I had no idea what to do next. The 4th surgery failed on a Tuesday morning in March. Dr. Chen, the lead cardiac surgeon I'd flown in from Johns Hopkins, emerged from the operating room with that expression I'd learned to dread. The artificial valve had detached again during the final welding phase, just like the previous 3 attempts. "The microfractures keep appearing at the junction point," he explained, pulling off his surgical cap. "We're getting perfect adhesion initially, but when we test the valve under normal heart pressure, hairline cracks develop in the titanium mesh. It's a metallurgy problem we can't seem to solve." I threw money at the problem like I always did. Within 48 hours, I'd assembled a team of the world's best cardiac engineers from Switzerland, Japan, and Israel. Each consultation cost $50,000. I funded 3 different research labs to develop alternative valve designs simultaneously. I bought prototype manufacturing equipment worth $2 million and had it installed in a private medical facility. None of it worked. The Swiss team created a valve with a different alloy composition. Same result, microfractures under pressure. The Japanese engineers developed a revolutionary new welding technique using laser precision at the molecular level. The welds looked perfect under microscopic examination, but failed catastrophically during stress testing. The Israeli specialists suggested a completely biological approach using engineered tissue, but Brielle's condition was progressing too rapidly for that lengthy process. Each failure meant another surgery for Brielle, another round of anesthesia, another recovery period that left her weaker than before. She was losing weight, and the vibrant girl who used to sketch for hours could barely hold a pencil for 20 minutes without exhaustion. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. I was in my office reviewing proposals from yet another team of consultants when my assistant knocked on the door. "Mrs. Hartwell, the hospital called. Brielle's asking for you." I found her in bed, staring out the window at the Seattle skyline. She'd been sketching again, but this time it wasn't a building. It was a portrait of her father, drawn from memory with the skill that reminded me how much talent she'd inherited. "Mom, I heard the doctors talking outside my room," she said without looking at me. "They think I can't hear them, but I can. Dr. Chen told the other surgeon that they're running out of options." My throat tightened. "Brielle, we're going to figure this out. I'm bringing in more specialists. There's a team from Germany that specializes in exactly this type of case." She turned to face me, and I saw David's eyes filled with a wisdom no 16-year-old should possess. "Mom, you've spent millions of dollars trying to fix my heart. You've hired the smartest people in the world, but maybe some problems can't be solved by throwing money at them." "Don't talk like that," I said, fighting back tears. "I'm not giving up on you. I'm not asking you to give up. I'm asking you to stop thinking that your wallet is the answer to everything. She picked up her sketchbook and flipped to a drawing I hadn't seen before. It was our family before David died. Him pushing her on a swing while I watched from a park bench, actually present in the moment instead of checking my phone. I know you think you're protecting me by building this business empire. But Dad didn't love us because we had money. He loved us because we were together. When's the last time we were just together, Mom? Not in a hospital room, not talking about treatments or doctors or surgeries, just us. That night I stood alone on the hospital roof, looking out at the city lights. My company's building dominated the skyline, its logo glowing like a monument to my success. But up here, watching my daughter fight for her life 4 floors below, that success felt hollow. The medical team was scheduling a 5th surgery attempt, but their confidence was shattered. Dr. Chen had privately admitted they were pursuing options with diminishing probability of success. In corporate terms, they were out of ideas. For the first time since David's death, I felt completely powerless. All my billions, all my connections, all my business acumen meant nothing. My daughter was dying, and I couldn't buy, negotiate, or strategize my way out of it. It was 2 a.m. on a Thursday when everything changed. I'd left the hospital after another devastating consultation with a team of German specialists who'd flown in specifically for Brielle's case. They'd spent 6 hours reviewing her medical files and concluded what everyone else had. The microwelding problem was beyond current technological capabilities. I drove to my office building instead of going home. I couldn't face the empty penthouse, couldn't sit in that sterile space surrounded by awards and accolades that meant nothing now. The Seattle rain was coming down hard, the kind of downpour that makes the city feel like it's washing itself clean. That's when I saw him. Chester was huddled under the narrow overhang by the building's side entrance, trying to stay dry. Most people would have walked past, maybe called security to have him moved along. But something made me stop. He had a broken wheelchair in front of him, and despite the rain and cold, he was methodically working on it with tools that looked like they'd been salvaged from a dozen different places. His movements caught my attention first. Every adjustment he made was precise, deliberate. There was no wasted motion, no frustrated cursing when something didn't work right away. He'd examine the problem, make a small adjustment, test it, then move to the next issue. It reminded me of watching David work on our old car in the garage, back when we couldn't afford to take it to a mechanic. "Excuse me," I said, pulling my coat tighter against the rain. "You're going to get soaked out here." He looked up at me with eyes that were clearer and more intelligent than I'd expected. "Rain's part of the job description when you live outside, ma'am, but this chair won't fix itself, and whoever needs it probably can't afford to buy another one." I reached for my wallet, pulling out the cash I had on hand. Maybe $300. "Here, take this. Get somewhere dry for the night." Chester went back to working on the wheelchair. "Appreciate the offer, but I don't take charity. I work for what I get, even if the work doesn't pay much." Something about his dignity in that moment broke through my exhaustion. "What kind of work?" "I fix things, bikes, radios, small appliances, anything mechanical that people throw away but still has life in it." He gestured to the wheelchair. "Found this in a dumpster behind the medical center. Brake mechanism's shot, but the frame is solid. Someone's going to need this." I don't know why I sat down on the wet concrete next to him. Maybe it was the way he talked about his work with the same pride I used to feel about mine. Maybe it was exhaustion. Or maybe I just needed to be around someone who understood what it meant to fix things. "I'm trying to fix something too," I heard myself saying, "but I don't think it can be fixed." Chester looked at me more carefully now, taking in my expensive clothes and the obvious signs of wealth. "What kind of problem?" "My daughter needs heart surgery, but the artificial valve keeps failing. The doctors say it's a metallurgy issue. The microwelding won't hold under pressure." I surprised myself by explaining it in simple terms instead of the complex medical jargon I'd been drowning in for months. Chester set down his tools and gave me his full attention. "Micro-welding, you said? What kind of materials?" "Titanium mesh attaching to heart tissue. They get perfect adhesion initially, but hairline fractures develop when tested under normal cardiac pressure." His eyes lit up with recognition. Thermal expansion coefficient mismatch. I bet they're using a standard two-stage cooling process. I stared at him. How do you know that? I spent 30 years at Boeing doing precision welding on aircraft components. Similar problem, different scale. When you're joining materials with different expansion rates, you need a graduated cooling sequence, not a standard two-stage. He grabbed a piece of cardboard from beside him and started sketching with a worn pencil stub. See, the titanium wants to contract at a different rate than the organic material. That creates stress fractures at the junction point. I watched this homeless man draw a diagram that made more sense than anything the expensive consultants had shown me. You really think this could work? Ma'am, I don't know much about hearts, but I know everything about making dissimilar materials bond permanently under stress. This isn't a medical problem. It's an engineering problem. That's when I made the decision that would save my daughter's life. Would you come with me to meet the surgical team? Chester looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Lady, I'm homeless. They're not going to listen to me. They'll listen to me. And right now, you understand this problem better than anyone I've paid millions to consult. The risk was enormous. If I brought a homeless man into a sterile surgical environment and his solution failed, I'd destroy what little credibility I had left with the medical team. But as I sat there in the rain watching Chester sketch modifications that addressed the exact technical failures we'd been battling, I realized something crucial. I'd been so focused on buying the right experts that I'd forgot expertise doesn't always come with the right credentials. Chester folded up his cardboard diagram and looked at me seriously. If I do this, it's not charity. It's work. And if it helps your daughter, that's payment enough. The next morning, I walked into Seattle Medical Center with Chester beside me, both of us knowing we were about to either save my daughter's life or destroy any remaining hope she had. The medical team was gathered in the conference room for what Dr. Chen had called our final consultation before attempting the fifth surgery. Dr. Chen's face went through a series of expressions when I introduced Chester. Confusion, then concern, then barely concealed irritation. Mrs. Hartwell, I understand you're desperate, but we can't have unauthorized personnel in a sterile medical environment. He's not unauthorized, I said firmly. He's a consulting engineer with 30 years of experience in precision welding, and he thinks he knows why our valve attachments keep failing. The silence in the room was deafening. Dr. Martinez, the specialist we'd flown in from Switzerland, actually laughed. With all due respect, Mrs. Hartwell, we've consulted with the world's leading biomedical engineers. We don't need advice from someone living on the street. That's when Chester stepped forward. His voice was calm, professional, and completely transformed from the man I'd met in the rain. The problem isn't with your valve design or your surgical technique. It's with your thermal management during the welding process. You're treating this like a standard biomedical application when it's actually a dissimilar materials bonding problem. Dr. Chen frowned. I'm sorry, but what qualifications do you have to make that assessment? Chester pulled out his worn cardboard diagram. 30 years at Boeing designing precision joints for aircraft components. I've solved this exact problem 1,000 times, just at a different scale. He moved to the whiteboard and began sketching with confidence that commanded attention. Your titanium mesh has a thermal expansion coefficient of 8.6 micrometers per meter per degree Celsius. Heart tissue is approximately 12.5. When you cool from welding temperature using your standard two-stage process, the materials contract at different rates, creating microscopic stress fractures at the junction. The room went completely quiet. Dr. Chen moved closer to the diagram. Go on. You need a three-stage cooling sequence with intermediate temperature holds. First, drop to 400 degrees and hold for 30 seconds to allow initial stress relief. Then to 200 degrees for another 30 seconds. Finally, controlled cooling to body temperature. The graduated approach eliminates the differential stress that's causing your fractures. Dr. Martinez was now studying the diagram intently. This is actually sophisticated metallurgy. Where did you say you worked? Boeing Commercial Airplanes, Everett facility. I designed welding processes for wing attachment points, landing gear connections, engine mounts. Components that absolutely cannot fail under extreme stress, just like your heart valve. Dr. Chen turned to his surgical team. This approach could work. The theory is sound. We've been so focused on the biological integration that we missed the basic materials science. Theory is one thing, said Dr. Martinez. We need to test this on valve prototypes before we risk another surgery. Chester nodded. I'd recommend testing under cyclic stress that mimics heart contractions, not just static pressure. Hearts don't beat once and stop. 3 hours later, we were in the hospital's research lab watching Chester work alongside the surgical team. His hands moved with the precision I'd first noticed outside my building, but now I understood what I was seeing. This wasn't a homeless man tinkering with junk. This was a master craftsman applying decades of expertise to save my daughter's life. The first test valve held perfectly under static pressure. The second held under dynamic cycling that simulated 6 months of heartbeats. The third prototype, welded using Chester's exact specifications, remained structurally perfect after stress testing that would have destroyed the previous designs in minutes. I've never seen fusion integrity like this in a biomedical application, Dr. Chen admitted, examining the microscopic structure. The bond is actually stronger than either base material. Chester was cleaning his hands at the lab sink, acting like he'd just fixed another broken wheelchair instead of revolutionizing cardiac surgery. It's not magic, Doc, just paying attention to what the materials are trying to tell you. That afternoon, Brielle's surgery began with Chester observing from the gallery. For the first time in months, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. Not the desperate hope that comes from throwing money at problems, but the quiet confidence that comes from watching someone who truly knows what they're doing. When Dr. Chen emerged from the operating room 6 hours later, he was smiling. Perfect attachment, 0 microfractures, the valve is functioning flawlessly. He looked up at Chester in the observation gallery. Your daughter is going to be fine, Mrs. Hartwell, and we owe it to a man who understands that sometimes the best solutions come from the most unexpected places. 3 days after the surgery, I found Chester in Brielle's hospital room, teaching her how to sketch mechanical diagrams. She was sitting up in bed, color returning to her cheeks, carefully drawing the valve design that had saved her life. The key is understanding what each component does before you draw it, Chester was explaining, his weathered finger tracing the lines on her paper. An architect needs to know how things work together, not just how they look. Brielle looked up when I walked in. Mom, did you know Grandpa Chess designed parts for the planes we fly on? He's been telling me about structural engineering. Grandpa Chess. She'd given him a nickname, and the way his eyes lit up when she said it told me everything I needed to know about what this meant to him. Chester, I said, sitting down in the chair I'd occupied for so many sleepless nights. I owe you more than I can ever repay. You saved my daughter's life. He shook his head. Your money bought the tools, the hospital, the surgeons. I just pointed out something they missed. We all played a part. But I knew better now. No, you did something I couldn't do with $2.3 billion. You listened. You understood. You solved a problem that the world's best experts couldn't figure out. Over the following weeks, as Brielle recovered completely, I learned Chester's full story. After his wife, Margaret, died of cancer in 2008, the medical bills had consumed their savings, their house, everything they'd built together. He'd been too proud to ask family for help and too devastated to focus on finding another engineering job. The streets became his home, but his mind remained sharp, his skills intact. I kept fixing things because it was the only way to remember who I used to be, he told me one evening as we watched Brielle sketch her latest architectural design. Every broken radio, every busted bicycle, it was practice for something bigger. I just never knew what. I offered Chester a position as head of mechanical innovation at my company, but he surprised me with his counteroffer. I'll take the job, but I want to split my time. Half in your labs, half helping people like me who fell through the cracks. That conversation led to what became the most meaningful project of my career. We created a program that identified homeless individuals with forgotten skills and paired them with technical challenges our company faced. Chester wasn't an anomaly. We found former NASA engineers living in shelters, retired teachers with advanced degrees sleeping in cars, skilled craftsmen whose industries had abandoned them. 47 people found employment through the program in its first year. More importantly, they found purpose again. Chester moved into a company-provided apartment but spent his evenings at homeless shelters, teaching basic engineering and problem-solving skills to anyone who wanted to learn. Brielle made a full recovery and chose to study architecture with a focus on community development. Her senior project was designing a job training center specifically for homeless individuals with technical backgrounds. "I want to build something that brings people together," she told me, like Chester brought us together. 2 years later, I was sitting in a university auditorium watching my daughter graduate magna cum laude when Chester leaned over and whispered, "You know what's funny? I lost everything and found my purpose fixing things for people who thought they had everything." I looked at him, this man who had taught me that the most valuable currency isn't money but human compassion and lived experience. "You didn't just fix a heart valve, Chester. You fixed our hearts too." The artificial valve Chester helped perfect is now saving lives in hospitals across the country. But that's not the real legacy of that rainy night when I met him outside my office building. The real legacy is what I learned about listening, about recognizing wisdom wherever it comes from, and about the difference between buying solutions and finding them. I built a billion-dollar empire by thinking I could purchase anything I needed. Chester taught me that some of life's most important answers come free, offered by people who society has dismissed, but who carry within them experiences and knowledge that no amount of money can buy. Today, when I face a problem I can't solve, I don't immediately reach for my checkbook. I listen. I look for the Chester in every situation, the overlooked expert who might see what everyone else has missed. Because I learned that night in the rain that sometimes the most valuable solutions come from the most unexpected places, offered by people who have nothing to lose and everything to give.